So welcome everyone. So there's kind of a story to this whole thing. I don't know if you know Marlis Reckemer, is that how you pronounce it? I never know how to pronounce her last name. If you know Marlis is just excitable about everything. And I got this email from her, it must have been in the winter, I don't know when I got it from her. And she said, I just took this awesome class over at, what's it called? Ollie?
Ollie, yeah.
And she said, I think we should bring the guy here and have him teach about happiness and retirement. And she went on and stuff. And so, and then she called you, and then I think you called me, or I called you, I can't remember. So we started a conversation. And so we decided we'd kind of test the waters with this kind of 1 hour class with the possibility of doing a 4-week class type thing with the same topic. So this is Byron Thompson. Byron has written 2 books. I think one is called Build Your Dream, teaching others about finding your purpose and then pursuing it. And then this one called Sea Change, about realizing your dreams in retirement, so appropriate, and how to be happy in retirement. In his professional career, he's trained over 25,000 people in the skills needed for successful living. And that doesn't stop in retirement. So I'm going to have you add anything else you want to add on to that.
That was a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much.
And it's all yours.
Could have mentioned that I'm a prince, but you didn't. Good morning, everyone.
Oh, I got to say one more thing.
Oh, no, I hate that. When I was geared up, I was ready to go, Judy, and then all of a sudden she said, oh, no, I want to give a talk.
Yeah, wait, Columbo. I say it all the time. So he has... not charged a fee for this class to come in. So we will be taking a little free will offering afterwards to kind of help cover the cost of bringing him in. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I don't get any part of that, so that all goes to the church. And apropos to that, whether it's when I get paid for speaking, my writing, teaching, I don't keep any of that money. I donate it all either to my church or my Rotary Club. And Sandy, you're asking yourself, why would a person do that? Because I've got enough money to last me the rest of my life. Providing I go by next Tuesday. That's the only thing I have to do. Good news and bad news. This will be a participation meeting. Good news is your participation consists of answering questions that I ask. And the bad news is all of the answers are yes or no answers. And even better news, all of the answers are yes. You don't mind doing that, do you? No, okay, we got a problem group here right out front. You have a piece of paper in front of you. If you would just make a quick note or two for yourself. I know why I'm here, but I want to know why you came out this morning. What was it about the publicity for this event that caused you to say, I want to come and sit in on that? Just make a note or two. Now, there's a misnomer in the title that talks about retirement, and a couple of you already mentioned this to me. It's too late, I'm already retired. This is really not about retirement. I wish my publisher had given it a different subtitle. Because it's about being fulfilled and realizing your dreams in the next chapter of our lives and our futures. So I want to talk to you about our futures, yours and mine, not only ours, but the people that are coming behind us. Because hopefully what you'll gather from this is not only some techniques, tips, ideas that will enrich your own life, but you'll pass it on to your kids, grandkids, and anybody else you see on the street. I was reading Joseph Campbell's book this morning, Myths to Live By. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the mythologist Joseph Campbell. Brilliant guy who's passed on now. But he talks, his life's work was about the myths that are common throughout history and throughout society. And to a large extent, it tracks with and he talks about the hero's journey. Maybe you've seen that or heard about that. And I think each of us are on a hero's journey. that is a way in which we can assure ourselves that our lives are being well lived. And I'm kind of on the path, in my opinion, by my values and standards, to feel as though my life is being well lived. And if you walk out of here 6 hours from now, when we're done with this did you tell them it was 6 hours? Walk out of here re-inspired, recommitted to the things that you are doing or want to do to make your life even more meaningful, then our time will have been well spent. It is a participation meeting, so if you get bored with anything I'm saying, just raise your hand and we'll call on you instead of me. My first book was Build Your Dream, 12 Essential Tools for Successful Living. And it was based on my nearly 40-year career. I started very young, teaching men and women. Thank you for, I got somebody over here that gets my humor, so I'm gonna spend a little more time with you. My career working with people in their like mid-20s to mid-40s during the heart of their careers. And I learned a lot from them on what it takes to achieve success in living and in life and your career. And I adopted their ideas. They worked for me, so I passed them on in this book. But subsequent to my retirement, I started traveling and I got interested in this topic of what's next. And so I started interviewing people and reading and doing research on it. And I found out some things that we have in common. One of the most common questions I heard when I was conducting these interviews is, what do I do now that I'm no longer A, and fill in the blank. So that sets the groundwork for what we want to do. Let's hope that this goes in the direction you want to go. The best way to start is to find out why you're here. So tell me what you learned from your partner, or what, just talk about why are people here this morning?
Number one, we're on the right track, and are we being fulfilled, you know?
He and I talked about retirement not exactly being what we expected it to be, because I thought it was going to be a lot of fun and sitting around, and it ends up being a lot.
Okay.
And it's not that I'm not sure whether that makes me happy or not.
Okay. Oh, you are absolutely in the right place, because I've spent a number of years working on these questions. I heard a minister give a talk one time. He was conducting a goal-setting workshop for his flock, congregation, whatever you call y'all. So he said, my life is so good I can hardly stand it, but it's not good enough. So maybe, just maybe, that's what we'll talk about. Let's go to my notes here. I want to talk about our futures, yours and mine, and how to make it even better, even happier, enriched even more. And the best place to go is to that philosopher, Yogi Berra. And Yogi said the future ain't what it used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also said, don't look back, something might be gaining on you.
Okay. Would you like to come and help us? No, don't be sorry. I know all the help I can get. And he was quite right, because most of us in here can remember that the way this whole retirement thing started, Social Security, in 1935, long time ago, way before or after. Anyway, Roosevelt signed the predecessor to our Social Security Act with the assumption that the typical man would work until age 65, go home, get a retirement, sit down on a couch, where his dutiful wife would wait on him until he died 5 years later. And it worked out that way for a number of years. So the Social Security Act really made sense. But, like Yogi said, the future ain't what it used to be. Number one, typically, we don't work for the same company for 40 years and get a gold watch and a retirement ceremony. And there's no dutiful wife there. She's got a career of her own. And by this time, she's figured us out and she's not going to wait on us anymore. But that's another lecture for another time. What has changed, and this is a major change that impacts you and I today, is we are no longer getting a gold watch or a retirement party, and we're no longer passing away 5 years after our retirement. They're doing studies now at Stanford on longevity, and Laura Carstensen heads that study up, and what she's determined, and her people have determined, is that the average retiree now, given all good health and so forth, has another 25 or 30 years of life in front of them after they achieve the age of 65. Now, my personal plan is to live forever, and so far, so good. Okay, great. I've got more people laughing at my humor, so I'll do that. Since we've got more time, and this goes back to what you said, you're busy now, but, and I've found this in interviewing retirees, the issue is not being busy. The issue is being busy doing the right things. So that's what I want to talk about. What are the right things? Number of years ago, I worked for the Magnavox company selling stereos and television sets and so forth. And they had here in Arizona, I was in California at the time, a national sales meeting. So all the sales reps from all over the country came, and we went to the Camelback Inn up there in Phoenix or Scottsdale. And the first speaker was the CFO of the company, and he talked about the retirement plan. Now, I was a young pup, and he's up there talking about something that was going to be 40 years in the future. And I just didn't have that much understanding of it or interest in it. So the next speaker was from Michigan State University, Dr. Eugene Jennings. And Jennings got up and he said, that's a very interesting subject. He said, I'm interested in retirement. He said, I'm going to change my whole speech. He said, I'm interested in the numbers of men and women who have retired but have not done the courtesy of letting their companies know. And in my work training men and women, I found that this was a pretty common situation. People dug in and worked until they retired. I remember going to one of my high school reunions, and I talked to the guy who played right tackle on our football team, and I said, how you doing? He said, great. He said, I got 2 more years and then I'm out of that place. And I thought, what an unhappy way of looking at life. Whether it's working or it's in our life afterwards. So Jennings got me thinking when he said this, and the gist of his talk was, if you're not giving your full to your company, and if you're not enjoying it, then get out. Do yourself a favor, do your company a favor, do your family a favor. And then he gave examples of those things. Well, it was with that a year later, my wife Patricia and I found ourselves living in Spain, because I chucked that job and we thought that it would be better if we did that. And spent 2 years, just about, living on the island of Mallorca and in Barcelona. We had 2 little girls at that time, and it was a great experience for us. I look back on it afterwards as Byron's folly, because I managed to go dead broke and headed back to the States. I called my best friend Bob James, who was living in Manhattan at that time, and I said, Bob, I'm on my way back. He hadn't heard from me for a year. He said, what's up? I said, well, I'll be passing through New York. He said, well, come and stay with Betty and me for a couple of days. So we got there, and after getting settled in, he said, how you doing? So I had to tell him the truth. Not too good. I said, I'm dead broke. I said, I've been out of the country for 2 years. That's not going to look good on my resume. I don't have a job, and I don't have any money. He smiled at me. He said, well, what business are you in? And I got so angry. I said, I don't have a business. I don't have a job. I don't have any money. I don't even know how I'm going to get my family back to California. He said, well, he just smiled at me. He said, well, you'll be all right. He said, but I mean, what business are you in as a man? Oh, whoa, I didn't have an answer for him. Changed the subject, got up the next day, borrowed some money from him, got my family back to California. But all I could think about was that question, what business am I in as a person, as a man? And the more I thought about it, the more I got it. And I must have been meditating on it while I was sitting on the beach in Mallorca, because I came up with it. I called him. I said, Bob, I got the answer to your question. He said, what question was that? I said, the what business question. He said, oh yeah, what'd you come up with? And I said, I'm in the business of helping other people grow. That's what I do, whether I'm teaching a class or standing in front of a group speaking or just sitting having coffee with a friend. I want to find out ways that I can help them to enrich their lives, to use more of their natural abilities. He said, well, that's great. Give me an example. I said, I've got a great one for you. I said, a couple of months ago, we were living in Barcelona, and I got tickets to a classical guitar competition. You know, the tickets were free. I didn't know a lot about classical guitar, but we went to the old Barrio Gótico, down in the Gothic section of Barcelona, into this old music hall, Musica. And there were a couple 100, 300 people there, and the judges came out and sat down. The contestants came out one after another. The first 4 were all the same. They were young men with black, slick back hair, tuxedos, expensive-looking classical guitars. And they sat down and they started to play, and Lord, what playing, it was good. Little I knew about classical guitar, but that was really good music. And then the 5th contestant came out. Oh, wow, what a difference. First of all, she was a woman. And she had a long granny-type gown on. Her hair was done up in a neo-hippie style. And she had an expensive-looking guitar. It looked as though it was older, but well taken care of. And she smiled at the judges, she smiled at the audience, and she sat down and she started to play, and the hair just stood up on the back of my neck. I didn't know anything about classical music then, don't know a lot more now, but I knew that I was listening to something that was extraordinary. And then as Patricia, my wife, and I were walking back to our pension there in a Barrio Gótico, I said, you know, I have a fantasy about those contestants. I think the young men have all gone back to their families, loosened their ties, poured themselves a glass of wine, and started to talk about what they were going to do differently next year. A different selection, different order of playing, so that they'd have a better chance of winning. But for her, I said, I see something different. I see her coming to a pension, maybe down here in the barrio, going in, letting her hair down, looking at the check, looking at the certificate for first prize, because she'd won hands down, throwing it on the bureau, kicking off her shoes, pouring herself a little glass of sherry, and picking up her guitar and starting to play. And I said, and I'm talking to my friend Bob James, I said, Bob, that's what I want. She was not playing for money. She was not playing for recognition or our applause or the judge's vote. She was playing because that's who she was. And I said, that's what I want for my life. I want to be able to help people grow. Well, that was the beginning. I won't tell you the rest of the story, how I happened to then get back in. I was in the Dale Carnegie business before I left, but I'd failed twice. But this time I got back in, and through using all of the principles that I talk about in the book there, I managed to end up owning my own business. And for nearly 40 years, I pursued my passion of helping people to grow. And that's why I came out today. So that's what I want to talk to you about, things that you and I can do. So I should talk about one of the major influences in my thinking is Martin Seligman, the psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania. And Seligman's latest book is called Fusion. He talks about well-being. When my mentor passed away at age 90 after a fall and hitting his head, and at his memorial service, his best friend gave a talk entitled A Life Well Lived. And I said, that's what I want for myself. That's what Seligman was talking about, well-being. So this may be the answer to your question, is there something more? And if there is, possibly we can find it in here. And this would be the topic of the training program. We don't have enough time here to go into all of these in depth. But please, go ahead. You look like you had a question.
No.
I need somebody to ask me a question. The first aspect of this is how we can judge whether our life is being well lived, whether we are achieving well-being, is are we experiencing positive emotions? Now, I am right now experiencing positive emotions. I don't like to do lectures. Campbell's book was based on his doing a series of lectures. I don't mind lecturing because, like everybody else, I love to hear the sound of my own voice. But I know that that does not do you any good. So what I want to do is, instead of lecturing you about this, is to ask you, looking at, and you don't have to turn these papers in, so you can make notes on it if you want to keep it. Ask yourself on a regular basis, what do I have planned for today that's going to bring up positive emotions? In Sea Change, I talk about a concept of I'm glad I did and I wish I had. And those are a couple of questions people could say, ask themselves. So if that's the case, then as you look forward to today or any day, say, what do I have scheduled today that's going to bring about positive emotions? And those can be any numbers of things. It's so personal, so individual, that for what's true for you is not necessarily true for me or anyone else. It can have to do with a hobby, an activity, a visit with a relative or a friend. But what causes that feeling, that rush of feeling of positiveness in our lives? So that's one thing.
We don't have time for that. No, too busy.
Okay. So remember,
Today to do,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have anything, you know.
well, no, there's only 24 hours a day. You're going to have 24 hours whether you're too busy or not too busy. So just look at what we're busy with and look for that thing that gives you that rush of good feelings. If you have something scheduled for today, my wife loves a garden. I hate gardening. If there's gardening that needs to be done, I'd rather go out and earn some money and pay somebody that loves gardening and have them do it, because it's just the way I'm wired up. So it's true that each of us has a full day scheduled, but is what we're going to do today bringing this rush of positive emotions? One of the ways to do that is Seligman's second point, which is engagement. And that's what Abraham Maslow talked about as a peak experience, when we lose track of space and time and we get so involved in what we're doing, whether it's listening to me speak, which is having people's rapt attention, except for those of you in the second row that are sleeping, or giving a presentation, or listening to music, or being with a friend or a relative. My daughter comes over every morning and we have coffee together, and it gives me a chance to be with her and strengthen my relationship with her and enjoy her and the person that she's becoming, things she's doing with her life. So that's another important area. And so here, going to too busy to do anything else, lady. What we can do is take a look at who we are associating with and who's enriching our lives and who's not that pleasant to be with. I think that's a great thing about having a spiritual community, is you get with like-minded people and you know that at least on one plane they are in accord with you. So you're doing the same things. So those relationships are important. Now the meaning, I've already given you the example of how I got into the business of training and development, because I found for me that provided meaning for my life, enabled me to do the things that I wanted to do. Then his fifth point was achievement. That maybe you start today by planning, what can I do today to incorporate these qualities in my day-to-day life? And at the end of the day, do a scorecard. Some communities have a way of counting their blessings. If you run out of paper, can I buy more sheets of paper? Guys, okay, if we need them. So, I've forgotten what they call that, but a gratitude journal. Some of you probably already do that, or keep track of what you've done that you feel grateful for, what blessings have come into your life. Test for Fit answers the question, what do I do now? Because now, I lived in Greece for a while, and one of the things we did, my wife and I, we took a tour and went up to the temple at Delphi. The ancient temple, if you remember the story, the oracle would grant you any wish you wanted, but first, before you went in, inscribed above the arch going into the temple was Plato's famous "Know Thyself." And so that really is a kind of thing that is worth our attention, I believe, is, what is valuable to me? What brings me personal satisfaction? What kinds of engagements do I have that nourish me, nurture me? What relationships do I have that are important? And what is the real meaning of my life at this juncture? And many of you are already doing this. And if there's a way for you to do more of it, I recommend you do that. If you don't know what's providing meaning for you, I'd suggest that's worth your sitting down and spending time on. Every morning during my morning meditation and prayers, I review that and ask myself, what is my purpose in life? Of course, coming here this morning was an obvious answer to that. My purpose in life is doing what I'm doing right now. It's talking to you, hoping that some of these pearls of wisdom that I have to throw out there will have some benefit to you. Back some years ago, I had a next door neighbor, Dr. Jim Lindsay. He headed up the childhood education department at Chico State University in Chico. And so as I was pontificating one day, I said to him, Herbert Spencer, the great English educator and philosopher, said, the great aim of education is not knowledge, but action. And I felt so righteous about that. He said, that's not true. And now my education is less than PhD level. So I was taken back. I thought that was pretty profound. So Liz, I said to him, what do you mean? He said, when I go to a state park and I read the plaque there, the inscription of what's there, I don't intend to take any action with that. And so I think I said something like, oh yeah, so's your mother. But subsequent to that, I've thought more about what Spencer said, and if I run into Lindsay again, I'm going to say to him, what Herbert Spencer said was the great aim of education is not knowledge, but action. There's a place for us to read, we don't have to be watching Nova on TV all the time or reading the classics. There's a place for People magazine and for light reading and all of those things. But the great aim is action, is us moving out there, making things happen. And that's why I'm recommending or suggesting that you and I, in addition to enriching our own lives, finding more excitement, more juice, more fun, as we go about our day-to-day activities, we start to look at this generations coming after us and say, what do these people need? Now let me tell you a wonderful story. About 3 years ago, I was in Barcelona. And I was having lunch with a former colleague of mine by the name of Wally Vega. Wally was in the Dale Carnegie business, running Carnegie in that part of, in Catalonia in Spain, at the same time that I was running it in Oregon. So he was 65 at the time, and I was doing research on this book. I said, Wally, why are you still working out there, getting up every morning, going out and giving talks and registering people for your training classes and teaching them? And he jumped up with that characteristic excitement of his, and he said, share what you've learned. I said, what? He said, you've spent a lifetime gaining knowledge and experience that other people can benefit from. For you to take that with you would be a waste. And I thought about that. And I thought about, you know, there are days that I'm scheduled to speak or to teach that I don't always want to, but I remember Wally's words, share what you've learned. Don't take it with you. And that's what I want you to do too. That's what I want me to do, for all of us to do. I wish I could remember the Western songwriter, singer who was playing golf with Clint Eastwood. And Eastwood mentioned, I'm going to turn 88 on Monday. And the fellow said, oh, what are you going to do? He said, well, I'm going to go shoot a movie. He said, why? He said, because I get up every morning and there's an old man that gets up with me. And I don't let the old man in. And I suppose the same thing applies to all of us. don't. And so the songwriter wrote a song, and I understand, I didn't see the movie The Mule, but I understand on the credits afterwards that that song was playing, Don't Let the Old Man In. Would you like me to sing it? Yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's a juncture that I think would be ideal for me and perhaps for the rest of us to get to each day, to ask ourselves, is what I'm doing right now getting me closer to who I am, to my goal? And if not, stop it. Oh yeah, PERMA is a good way to, an acronym to remember this. But as I recall from reading Seligman's book, which is in my notes again, what he's talking about there is that it's a way for us to evaluate how we've spent our time. So it's not a particular kind of achievement. It's as I look back on my day, has my living mattered? I think that's a good way to put it. I remember that Rabbi Harold Kushner, in his excellent book, "If all you've ever wanted is not enough," he said in counseling people on their deathbeds, he found that those people that had the most difficulty passing on were those people who realized that their living hadn't mattered, they hadn't made a difference. But those people who could let go most graciously were those people that realized, in an ultimate sense, my living has mattered. One of the philosophers said, if we look at our life as a book, when we're born, that's the beginning, and when we die, that's the end. It's not important what happens when we reach that ultimate date. What is important is how well a book is written. My mentor wrote his autobiography for his grandkids, and I think that's a worthwhile thing if we haven't done it. I haven't done it yet, but I'm thinking about doing that. What do I want my kids to know about the way I've spent my life? Now, they've lived with me, but they haven't lived at the depth that I've lived. So I'd like to tell them about that. So that might be worthwhile.
I would accomplish something. So when I retired and I felt like I still had to achieve, now I'm not talking about personal relationships maybe or emotions, I'm talking about acts that we do, okay? So I thought that I had to still accomplish something until one of my friends said to me, you know, you're retired now. You don't have to accomplish or achieve something every day. If you want to sit down and just read a book, sit down and read a book.
But you achieved something that you achieved something.
Well, see, but I never looked at it that way.
Right.
It was, what did you do for somebody, or what did somebody ask you, or you had to do this, or you had to go to a meeting, you had to accomplish or achieve these things.
The difference of achievements completely after you're retired than from when you were working.
It is, and I'm trying to learn that. But I think it is kind of an unusual word, and where that fits in a little bit.
I think primarily he used it because he needed an A to make PERMA.
Okay.
But I hear what you're saying, and I think a lot of us in this room can relate to it. Judy?
I think another word might have fit better, and that would be accomplishments. Because if you set out to do something, did you do it? That's an accomplishment.
Right.
And you said start the day with a goal, something to do, something to make you feel happy, and did you do it? Just reflect on what you've done.
I like that.
You can live in the glory of what you've done.
Even if all you want to do is to sit and read a book all day.
That's right, that's right.
You've accomplished
I
that.
think a word, fulfillment would be a better
For that,
word.
yeah.
Well, yes, I like fulfillment, and so we might change this to peripherum. But I've liked the word fulfillment for some time. We're fulfilled when 5.5 more hours to go, and then we're done. I agree with that. And the best definition of success or achievement or accomplishment that I've ever heard is the progressive realization of a worthy goal or a worthwhile ideal. And so that's why at the start of the day we ask ourselves, what am I going to do today? We just lost the poet Mary Oliver recently. And in her wonderful poem, A Summer's Day, she closed with this question. She said, I ask you, what are you going to do with this one wonderful life? And that's not an exact quote, but I have the exact quote in my notes if you want it. But essentially, that's what she was asking. Do you know the exact quote?
You're close.
Yeah.
I want to say when you quote a poet, it's really important to quote them exactly.
Yeah.
Because they work so hard to make every word perfect.
That's correct. And I've only written a few poems in my life, but out of respect for Mary Oliver, tell me, what is it you plan to do with this one wild and precious life? Yeah. And I'll close with my own thought and then ask you some questions. And I stole this from Eugene Jennings when he spoke, and that's been many years ago, as you can imagine. But he closed with this thought. He said, you only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough. And that's what I would hope for you, and that's what I would hope we've accomplished to some extent in this short time we've had together this morning. I'd like to do a more in-depth version of this material. I'm going to do it at the Center for Spiritual Living in September and do it in 4 sessions, 90 minutes each, because that's about all the longer I can stand up and speak. And what we'll do is take these things apart and enable you to come out with an action plan for your life for the next how many ever years. A personalized well-being plan. And it'll be more participation, less me talking. My question of you, and are you able to hand in something, or?
These are just notes for me.
I know you want to keep your own notes. Fortunately, I have an assistant who will make sure that everybody gets one of these.
Oh, are you going to be the assistant's assistant? Yes.
Oh,
There's one thing you have to continue on when you retire.
yeah. Hold on, everyone. Go ahead, please.
There's one thing you have to, when you retire, you gotta think of, for instance, I'm a retired physician, but I cannot see a welfare, or see a patient free or work on any claims unless I pay $10,000 of malpractice insurance. They limit on all, I have many physician friends the same way, that are, you have to pay, to see one patient, you gotta pay $10,000, that's without being OB, without doing surgery, just to look at colds that you cannot, or physical exams for camp. To do as a physician, you gotta pay malpractice insurance, and it may be now more than 10,000, with 10,000 years.
Wow.
So you got to change what you're doing, but still it's, and the Presbyterian Church would not take people over 60 to go to foreign missions, because they may have to pay them to get sick to come back. And so there's a lot of limitations that a professional person runs into. Teachers probably know the same thing, but we, as physicians, and that's one reason we don't participate in some of the other things, because you don't give medical advice to somebody who's on, say, what do you call these things, where they take older people who are dying and take care of their families. It may be interpreted, they say, well, so-and-so, then the board, like if you say something different, say, don't care, give a different opinion, or you can be accused of practicing medicine again.
Yeah.
So there's a real problem with it. And people look at you and think, why aren't you doing this? Well, there's a reason. I don't have $10,000 extra now because I practiced the last few years in other mission activities. And
So, but you're finding things to do other than practice
I
medicine.
fix roofs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Don't you laugh on me.
Picks on his friends.
Oh, we're friends. Hey, friend.
Diane, you did not tell me they were rowdy and they would get out of control. Would you take the clean sheet of paper that you have in front of you? Do you have one?
I got a napkin.
Why do you not have one?
He ran out. Oh.
Let me do this.
Oh, you can have mine.
What do you want on there?
Look at Terry.
I saw my doctor yesterday, 78 years old. He's continuing to practice because he said, I tried retiring 3 times.
I practiced in 72 and I went back.
Retired 3 times.
I tried 3 times.
Yeah.
Last time I went back and they hired me. I was 15 years too old. I had to take pension at the same time I made salary as a student health physician.
Yeah. Okay, question number 1.
What?
I haven't asked it yet.
No.
Let's go. Okay.
Did you find today's use of your time worthwhile?